The one and only address is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we, va'avatem et Hashem Elokechem, when we will serve and worship God, everything else will fall into place, the Mamnoah says. This week's parasha is Parashat Terumah. Parashat Terumah tells us now that after the Jewish people, they went through a lot of things. They went through the amazing experience of the Exodus along with its 10 plagues. They went through the experience of the splitting of the sea, outrunning the Egyptians, God closing down the sea on them, coming out, having the war with Amalek and defeating them, and then obviously the Sinai revelation when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Jewish people, via Moses, the Torah HaKadosha, our holy Torah. Now unfortunately we know, after the giving of the 10 Commandments and Moses ascends for 40 days and 40 nights, we had that miscalculation from the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, and they forced, unfortunately, Aharon to make a new god, and out came from the fire a golden calf. This destroyed almost completely the relationship between the Jewish people and God, and it was a process of Moses praying and beseeching God to restore that relationship. God comes to Moses and tells him, let's get rid of this nation, we'll keep you. They're a sinful nation. We'll keep you and we'll make a brand new nation from you. You will still be king, you will still be Navi, you will still be the leader. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, absolutely not. Then comes, and this is what we deal with in this week's parasha, God's way of proving His forgiveness to the Jewish people. He commands us to make a mishkan, a tabernacle, which for all intents and purposes for us to understand was a portable Bet HaMikdash, a portable mishkan that was to act for the Jewish people as their connection between God and themselves for the 40 years of wilderness and wandering in the desert. So this was 40 years. Actually, if we look at the construction of the Mishkan, and that's what goes into the details of this week's parasha, we see that it is quite similar, yet different in size, yet the setup and the structure and the concepts are very similar to the eventual permanent Bet HaMikdash, just in a miniature version. Now, this week's parasha speaks about the fundraising of the cost to build this tabernacle, the Mishkan, and details the plans on how and what to do. And it goes through all of the parts of the Mishkan. Now, Rashi asks a fascinating question. He says, we're going through everything, all of the items and the raw material in order to build this Mishkan, and the Torah tells us in verse 5, chapter 25, verse 5, it says, Ve'orot elim me'odamim, and all of the ram skins that were dyed red, Ve'orot techashim, and the techashim skins. These were used as the roofs and the wall for the covering of the Mishkan. Va'atzeh shitim, and the shitim wood. Rashi asks, from where do the Jewish people find shitim wood, which we can loosely translate as cedar wood, very strong wood? From where do they find this wood? In the wilderness, in the desert. We would not find such wood there, neither would the Jews. Where did it come from? Rashi answers with a famous midrash. The midrash says, Yaakov Avinu foresaw in Nevuah, God sent him a revelation, that eventually after he goes down to Egypt, and the Jewish people will be there for the duration of their time, we know that to be 210 years, they will exit, they will leave, and they will need to build a Mishkan, and they will need wood for that. So since Yaakov was revealed that prophecy that they will need wood to build the Mishkan, So what he did was he brought wood from Israel on his way down to Egypt, and he planted those trees. He took trees and he planted those trees in Egypt, and he commanded his children that eventually when you leave, you, your grandchildren, the descendants, whoever it is, take these trees out with you. You will need them for the building of this Mishkan. Now, what specifically is a shittim wood? We never find the word shittim, at least so often, and wood from shittim. So the Me'am Loez explains as follows. He says this word shittim actually are trees that come from Nahal Shittim. We do find that word. Nahal Shittim means the stream, the river of Shittim, which according to tradition back in the time was a stream that anyone who drank from that water, it promoted them to have a drive and desire for promiscuity, for inappropriate relationships, for a lot of impurity, the opposite of holiness. So when Yaakov was told, and he was told this prophecy that he will have the Jewish people leaving and need wood, he thought to himself, what better wood can I take than the wood from an impure place and change it to the opposite to purify it, to the most impure thing coming from a source of impurity that will be now for the most pure part of the basic structure of the Mishkan. So he took it, and we know, as we say in the concept in Hebrew, ze leumat ze. This for that, this corresponding and opposite of that. So we took something with impurity, and he now promoted it to being something pure and holy. So this is where it's coming shittim, atze shittim. There are actually, the Midrash explains that there are 25 different species of cedar wood. This was back in the day. Nowadays, if you Google it, you will find many, many more than that. To their knowledge, there was 24 different species, and there were amongst them 8 which were the most important in its ability, that it was very, very strong. Yet, out of all of those, the least strong of the group of strongest was this shittim wood. Yet it was specifically Yaakov chose this cedar wood because of this added benefit of taking something impure and now making it pure. Furthermore, Yaakov told his descendants that when you will leave, the Egyptians will come and ask you, well, what are you leaving with all this stuff for? You must be on the run. So to the opposite, Yaakov told them to answer, if we were on the run, if we were running away, we would leave our stuff, we'd take our valuables and run for our lives. All we're asking for is 3 days to go serve God, bring sacrifices, and come back. And the proof was, we are going to leave with 48 beams of wood, which were the height of 10 amot to the equivalent of 15 feet, made out of solid and strong cedar wood. We could imagine how heavy that is. And Yaakov told his descendants, you tell the Egyptians we're not on the run. If we were on the run, we wouldn't take this. We have a mission, we have a goal. We're going to build an altar and bring sacrifices to God. And for all intents and purposes, we're coming back. Furthermore, we are taking along with us much livestock, much sheep and cattle. And again, if we'd be on the run, we wouldn't be taking that. We'd bring 1, 2, maybe 1 per family. Why so much? And to that you will answer them, because in 210 years there were no sacrifices being brought at all. Yaakov Avinu brought his last sacrifice before entering the land of Egypt, before leaving Israel. 210 years, no sacrifices between the Jewish people and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They were thinking maybe retroactively God would have us bring sacrifices for the 210 years that we missed. Again, all of this was Yaakov planning for the Jewish people a hopefully successful escape out of Egypt in order to become Am Yisrael, Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people. The Zera Shimshon now goes on to ask a very nice question. He says, if we look at everything else needed to construct and to fabricate the Mishkan, there's one thing only that Yaakov cared about to plan for the Jewish people to have in the desert. And that was this wood. What about planning that they'll have gold and silver? Maybe the precious gemstones that the Kohen Gadol will need on his breastplate. Why don't we see that Yaakov planned on having them to bring anything else out, and only this wood did he plan on? And he continues and he says, if you want to say all those other materials, those raw materials were going to come as a miracle from God, and the clouds, the Ananei Kavod, we're going to bring it, the clouds of glory, we're just going to bring it for them, so the wood would be brought as well as a miracle. And if not, so let's have everything else prepared. Either way, it seems weird, the Zera Shimshon saying that Yaakov only prepared and planted and sought out to take care of the wood for the construction of the Mishkan. He gives two answers. The first answer is based on a midrash. The midrash says that the reason why cedar wood was created was because it would be able to serve its purpose in the construction of the Bet HaMikdash. Of the Mishkan and the Bet HaMikdash, both. Its whole reason for God creating it was for it to serve as a strong and solid structure for the Mishkan, for this tabernacle. Very nice. So what? Look what the Zera Shimshon says. If Yaakov wanted that God would be able to use the thing that was created by him and have the Jewish people to use it specifically for the Mishkan. Think of it, he says, during the 6 days of creation, when was vegetation created on? The fourth day. The fourth day of creation. God did something extra. He created shitim, atzeh shitim, cedar wood. He created it for a specific purpose, for it to be used in the construction of the Mishkan. Yaakov, the Zera Shimshon is saying, was thinking it would be a waste of its creation if the original and natural tree was not used. Rather, we would have to rely on a miraculous cedar tree that God would deliver through the clouds. So in order so that God's planning and creation of that cedar tree coming to this world would be used for its very purpose that it came for, he wanted to use an authentic natural tree and not a miraculous tree God would bring. That's his first answer. Listen to his second answer. His second answer is another midrash that says God was setting a precedent. He was leading by example by commanding the Jewish people to build the Mishkan with wood of a cedar tree. Now, what's so specific about a cedar tree? A cedar tree bears no fruit. So God was setting the example. When you build a house, do not use wood of a tree that bears fruit, because what you will be doing is destroying that tree and destroying that fruit and that life that can follow in order to build a structure, a house. It would be a waste for that everlasting fruit that could continue from that fruit tree. So God led the example and said, for my own house, the Bet HaMikdash, the Mishkan, don't use a fruit tree, use a tree that bears no fruit. So Zera Shimshon says, what was Yaakov thinking? He said, how could God prove his point and lead by example fully? Again, if it was the real tree and not a miraculous tree. If it was a miraculous tree, if in our lexicon we would consider that to be a synthetic tree. A tree that appears out of miracle, even though God delivers it to us, or would deliver it to us, is still synthetic. It's not natural. Yaakov said, I need the Jewish people to use the natural tree in order that God's message, why He even created this tree, and furthermore, chose this tree, which is a non-fruit bearing tree, to be used. The message would be delivered greater if it's a real tree. This is what the Zera Shimshon says. I wanted to take a lesson out of this, and I think we can all apply it to ourselves very close to home. And by doing so, we need to analyze who Yaakov Avinu was, one aspect of him. In our view of who Jacob the patriarch was, is he was definitely a planner. We see it throughout his life. I'll give very few examples because I want to get back to ours. But if we look at when he decides to make a deal with his father-in-law, time and time again, there was a plan, there was a goal. I'll work for you for 7 years, and then I'll have my wife. He got tricked. In 1 week, I'm going to give you the next one, and then I'll work the 7 years. But again, that was all planned. The 7 and 7 are up. 14 years he's been by his uncle, now his father-in-law. And he sees that now he needs to amass a livelihood for himself. He needs to prepare for himself a parnasah. So he prepares. He sets out, okay, we'll be here for a total of 20 years, 6 years. What am I going to do over those 6 years? Oh, he's going to go to where the animals drink and eat from, and he's going to make spots and lines on the wood. He was planning ahead. How was he going to come out successful from that scenario? I'll give a better one. When Yaakov finally decides, and he's told by God, yes, go to Egypt, leave the famine. He was being invited by Yosef to go to Egypt. The first thing he did, without fail, was he summoned his son Yehuda. He sent Yehuda to Egypt, and he told him, set up shop for us. How so? The only thing that's important. Set up a bet midrash. Set up a study hall. A yeshiva, a kollel, where when we come, we're going to have where to pray and learn Torah. He was planning, again, he was planning and planting for the future. Setting, again, an example and a precedent, what matters most. When you move somewhere, when you live somewhere, the most important part of a person's life. Yaakov did that yet again. Not only leaving Israel to go to Egypt, did he plan about the near future of the education of his family and the continuation of the Torah. He was also planning for the Mishkan. Right at that moment, after he sent Yehuda, that's when he went to go get the wood, the trees, from Nahal Shittim, the stream of Shittim. And again, it would not be so easy. There were only 70 people traveling down from Israel to Egypt. Yet they brought some of these trees and they replanted them in Egypt in order that the Jewish people will know, both based on these both midrashim of the Zera Shimshon, that this wood was created specifically for the Mishkan, and this wood is a special wood from a special tree that bears no fruit, not allowed to take something else of life in order to destroy it, to do something which is comfortable for us. And these examples teach us a very strong lesson as parents, as educators, as grandparents, that the most important thing in our lives is in order that we can plant seeds, plant trees, set up our children, our students, our grandchildren for success. That's what Yaakov Avinu was doing in both of these cases. Whether it had to do with sending Yehuda or whether it had to be bringing these trees. He was planting an everlasting message for them. We as parents have the duty to plant for our children. How do we plant for our children? So some say, well, I will put my son, my daughter, through college, university, make sure they have a profession so that they're able to support themselves. 100%. I give you that. It's absolutely needed. But that takes care of only one portion of a person's life, and that might be the material/physical part of their life, which is important by all means. But if as parents we don't plant the spiritual importances and things we look for our children to achieve, it will not be there. We have to decide, and we have to put them through the right education according to our Torah. We have to give them all types of education. We have to help them live in this world, understanding that this world is meshed with physical aspects and spiritual aspects, and none of them can be avoided, none of them can be forgotten about. Yaakov Avinu was teaching this to us. Make sure you put your children's education first. Make sure you care about planting for the future for your children. It's not only about leaving a business to your children or leaving inheritance to your children. That doesn't even take care of 50%. We're not even giving the ratio of 50% between materialistic and spiritual. Spiritual is much more important. We need to do both. But unfortunately, we forget that second and that more important part, which is the spiritual aspects of our life and the relationship as a family, as a community, as a Jewish people, that we need to instill and plant in our children. We saw that Yaakov planted that for his children and his descendants. We must do the same.